London calling. This is London calling on Longgrave. London calling. This is Westminster.
I am not an unbothered. I am a free man.
Down. I'm okay. I'm with a combat unit that's armed with automatic weapons.
Come on, Mrs. Jones. You've got to go to your second job now. You've got to earn extra money to pay the bedroom tax. I'm very lucky. I've got a second job in a chemical plant. Yeah, I'm making fluoride for Syria. They're shipping it to Syria.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
My lords, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to join Chris Everard in an undisclosed location deep under Buckingham Palace in Winston Churchill's war bunker.
Never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
God damn it, boy! These Brits are coming to get us!
Welcome, my friends, to the show which never ends.
My husband and I are not amused.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
Deep from inside the former communist bloc, where we now torture American citizens in Poland and the Balkan states, we're tuning in to the Chris Everard Show. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris Everard, and we are broadcasting live on the Truth Frequency. At Radio Calabria in the south of Italy. My special guest is Mr. Mark Sargent, and we're not only going to be discussing all of these theories about the shape of our planet, but we're going to be also discussing some kind of side theories and some legends that are to do with the hollow earth, the flat earth, and it's going to be an interesting show. So let's get cracking, because as a lot of you know, I've been an amateur astronomer for many years, and I have a very large telescope. It's a third of a meter telescope. I've basically spent the last few years observing the moon and also specialize in observing Jupiter and Jupiter's moons. And my telescope is so powerful you can actually see the 4 Galilean largest moons of Jupiter. Sometimes, if you're lucky, at this time of year, or actually it's easier when it's colder weather in the winter, you can actually see all 4 of those Galilean moons with the naked eye, because basically I've chosen to live in a place where you get very little cloud cover, because astronomy is one of the big passions in my life, and to be honest, I never get bored of looking through my telescope, and I use a Canon HD camera, which we're now actually going over to 4K, which is very, very high definition. We actually have a special coupling that's been made for us in Cambridge, and if you look at the Enigma channel, you can see plenty of TV shows and full-length documentaries, which I've made about astronomy and secret space projects, which I've been making those documentaries now since 2005. And I want to start this show by saying that space agencies in general employ former military people, and these people are very good at keeping secrets. And when we start discussing all of these interesting topics, I don't want to give the listeners the idea that space agencies can be trusted, because they are actually an extension of the military kind of establishment, of the military industrial complex. I've interviewed plenty of astronauts. I've met Edgar Mitchell, who died recently. I met Edgar twice and interviewed him. You'll see in my secret space documentaries on the Enigma channel, that's enigmatv.com, that I compare the official NASA footage from the Apollo missions with footage that was filmed on Earth. And a lot of people don't know this, but there is a life-size model of a big portion of the lunar surface, and it's at Flagstaff in Arizona. And that was built by NASA. If you ask them about it, they tell you about it. But if you don't ask them, they won't tell you. And there was a lot of rehearsals done on the Earth's surface. There was also a lot of rehearsals done underwater as well. Virtually every single rehearsal was filmed. And in my films, you can see that I compare the footage that was filmed during the rehearsals with the so-called actual official footage from NASA. And I think it's fair to say, and I think it's been properly proven, that at the time of those Apollo moon missions, which took place during the Cold War, we are dealing with a mixture of fact and fiction. And when they were lacking in footage of a certain segment of a certain mission, I'm pretty sure, I'm about 95% sure, that footage that had been filmed either underwater or in some training facility was inserted into the actual live NASA broadcasts. And if you're interested in this type of thing, then you're going to love this show. Now, my special guest is Mr. Mark Sargent. Mark, can you hear me?
I can hear you, and thank you very much for having me, Chris.
Okay. Now, Mark, am I right in saying that you're actually based in Washington?
Currently, yes. Seattle, Washington, West Coast.
All right. Okay. Now, you sent me some suggested questions, which I'm going to go through in this broadcast, but I've also been looking very carefully at some of these legends that have come up over the years about the actual shape and the actual form of our planet. And just for the listeners' benefit, I'm just going to give the listeners a rundown of some of the subjects which we're going to be discussing. We're going to be discussing fluid dynamics in space and fluid in zero gravity, because obviously the official Big Bang theory says that, you know, we started off as a bubble of lava. We're going to be talking about telescope observations, which I've done of various planets. And we're also going to be talking about planets which we do know are not spheres for sure, and particularly the moons of Mars. And I've chosen those because there's plenty of resources online. You can log into various space agency websites, and you can actually see some really good quality photographs of the moons of Mars. And like I say, they are not spheres, okay? And then, you know, we're going to go through some suggested topics that Mark emailed me earlier. And we're going to finish up with really basically looking at this amazing life of Admiral Byrd and this Operation High Jump, which was a Pentagon sponsored kind of operation in Antarctica. Now, what I would like to start with, Mark, is a Hollywood movie, which I'm sure a lot of the listeners may have seen, and it's called The Truman Show.
Yes.
Now, in this show, and I just want to explain it for the benefit of the listeners who have not seen it, the premise of the show is that there is a very, very, very large studio set, much larger than even the 007 Pinewood Studios set, which is enormous. I mean, it's so big they can build a mock-up of a nuclear submarine in it. And, you know, it's a really big studio. I think it's the world's biggest film studio. It's at Pinewood Studios in England. But in The Truman Show, if you can imagine that giant James Bond film set being blown up to such a size that you can actually build an entire virtual town, or real town, I should say, in that studio. And there is a dome roof, and the interior of that dome is populated by lots and lots of lights. And in one scene of the Truman Show, a studio light, nearly kills the main character and falls down, and it's marked with the label Sirius, which is one of the stars, Sirius, the star. And the premise of the film is that everything is recreated in this artificial ecosphere or biosphere. They can create wind. They have night and day. The stars that the characters in the movie are looking up at are actually, like I say, studio lights. And everyone is in on this trick apart from the main character. So the main character, the premise of the film is that he's an innocent person. He doesn't understand that he's being tricked in this virtual reality TV show, and he thinks that he's living in reality. Now, the reason I started with the Truman Show, Mark, is because, there's a lot of debates about lots of different possible shapes of our planet. Do you think that the Truman Show is what they call predictive programming? Do you think that there is an element of truth to it, or do you think it's just Hollywood fantasy?
No, I think there was some predictive programming to that movie.
Okay.
In the 1998 movie, starring Jim Carrey, and I thought it was very feasible. I love that movie. I love the whole premise.
Yeah.
I couldn't find a thing wrong with it when I watched it back in the theater almost 20 years ago. That if a person, and here's the key here, if a person is born into a Hollywood studio, and you can keep them from finding the edges of it. In his case, they gave him phobias of crossing bridges, and, although he didn't want to travel, if you can keep them from reaching the edge, can you fool them, into thinking that it's real life?
Yeah.
And I couldn't see why not, because, they explained it, the director played by Ed Harris.
Ed Harris. He was also, interestingly, he was in The Right Stuff.
Exactly. The only space movie ever.
And he's not actually in very many movies, is he, that guy?
Nah, he was big in the 70s and 80s, a little bit into the 90s. He was one of the commanders in, like, The Rock.
Okay, well, the big question I have, Mark, concerning the Truman Show is the model of the Hollywood studio that's in that Hollywood script.
Yes.
Where it's like a giant dome. And it's got all of the, wind machines and lighting and everything to create an artificial ecosphere.
Yeah.
Is that in any way close to what you believe, or one of the researchers that you've come into contact with? Are there people that believe that that is more or less the model of the planet?
Pretty much, yeah. You just, the Truman Show version, and it's tough to get exact scale. I was guessing it was around 20 miles wide, which is still monstrous.
Yeah.
And sort of shaped like a domed sports stadium.
That's
so
it,
much wider than it is high. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a snow globe, where a snow globe has a really, really high arc to it.
Okay.
But if you expanded it, that was one of the premises when I did Flat Earth Clues, was if you kept making that thing bigger and bigger. The thought I had was, Truman, you could fool a single person pretty easy because everybody else was in on it. How many people could you fit? That place was big enough you could have fooled a whole classroom full of kids, or 50 or maybe 100 people. But as you kept building it bigger and bigger, how many people could you fool? Yeah. And once you got to, a couple thousand miles wide, you had the potential of fooling an entire civilization. And
but that would be, an infeasible building, because even though domes are self-supporting, the amount of materials that you would need to build a building that's 2,000 miles in diameter, we wouldn't have those resources. I mean, it'd be like, I don't know whether you've seen the diagrams of the actual building of the pyramids. I mean, if they had a ramp, for example, the ramp would actually use more stones than the actual pyramid. Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about a dome being I don't know, 2,500 miles wide, which is I think it's three-quarters of the width of the USA. You're talking about using up so many building materials and so many resources that I don't know whether we have, we could actually do it.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, which is why I was the first to jump on it and said, look, whoever built this place was not us. It was definitely built, I believe, by a higher power. Now, whether you want to dig,
so let me just get this straight, because it's important that we get this straight at the beginning of the show. The Truman Show kind of setup, where I believe. So, what I want to ask you, Mark, is how is it that we've ended up with a flat? I presume what you're saying is it's a flat plane. It's covered by a dome, like the Truman Show. How comes that has been formed and it's not followed the universal laws of fluid dynamics in space?
Gotcha. If you want to build an artificial world, you wouldn't necessarily have to build a sphere to make it efficient. As a matter of fact, an enclosed flat circular system, not spherical, works a lot better in a lot of different ways. And I'm talking from...
Are you talking about a flat plane with a dome?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Like the Truman Show, yeah?
Yeah, like the Truman Show. I mean, fluid dynamics, yes, I understand what happens in zero gravity with fluid and how everything takes a spherical form. But that doesn't prove that space is, and all the planets are actually there. What I'm saying is that what is outside of here, we don't know, but I certainly don't think it's space. I think that this place was built as, firmament, dome, Truman Show structure, and that everything on the inside of it is an illusion. People come to me all the time and they say, oh, yeah, I've seen Mars, I've seen Jupiter. I'm not knocking on your astronomy skills. And I go, fine, you go to a planetarium, bring some binoculars with you. You see Jupiter in a planetarium, and depending on which one you go to, whether it's Neil deGrasse Tyson's or somebody else's, you look up and it looks pretty spherical. And you look with your binoculars. And my question is, if you use your binoculars on Jupiter inside a planetarium, does it look more or less real? And you come back and you say, well, it doesn't really matter because it's a projected system. It's fake. And I go, that's the point. If you walk outside of that planetarium, how do you know you're not in a bigger one? Because that's what I've.
It's a bit like that optical illusion painting, which I used to look at when I was a schoolboy, where you've got the French painter with a paint and he's painting a painting on the easel, and the painting that he's painting is of a painter with a painting on the easel.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a technology here that can create graphics on a level that we can't even tell with resolution. It's might as well be Mandelbrot resolution, which you could zoom in very, very good. I mean, let's put it this way. If no observatories, and granted a lot of radio telescope operators have died over the last 20, 30 years, but if a major observatory can't tell what they're looking at, then the average person, even with decent astronomy equipment, isn't going to be able to figure it out either. And that was the whole point. If you're gonna create the tapestry in the sky, you're gonna make sure the average person is not going to be able to figure this out. Except that now our detection ability seems to have caught up with it, which is why
it's really interesting. I've got a very open mind, but what I would say is that there's been a lot of advancements in astronomy. I studied astronomy at the University of Greenwich in London. And basically, I would say in the last 20 years, there have been amazing leaps forward. For example, there is now refraction astronomy. And what we're able to do is we're able to actually we're able to measure the mineral content of an asteroid or of another planet by measuring these fractional light components in the reflected light from that planet. And we're actually making discoveries about, the mineral composition and also the atmospheric composition of various planets. And that's going on now There are several science packs on various satellites. There's a Japanese one. And, you know, this is a major breakthrough where it's a bit like gas spectrometry. We're able to do that with planets, and we're able to actually read the component molecules in certain atmospheres. Now, that means that that planet is giving off more than just an optical image. It's actually showing us what the actual molecular makeup of the atmosphere is.
Oh, you want me to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay, all right.
This is something that's come along over the last 20 years.
All right. It's going to be tough for some of your listeners. And again, I appreciate your passion for astronomy, but you got to remember who's feeding you the data and who's telling you to interpret the data.
Well, you can buy the systems yourself.
Oh, I understand you can buy the systems yourself. Yeah. But who gave you the interpretation to read the data when you look at these stars? You know, everything. Yeah. What I'm saying is every space agency still, it all boils back to the Americans. And that is, if the American space program had something to hide, then everybody else is going to follow suit. I know I've been accused of picking on NASA from time to time, even though I'm from the United States. But when I looked into this thing, you got to remember, I did not want to be into flat Earth at all. I didn't think it was a cool topic at all. I thought, okay, I can knock this thing out in a weekend. Yeah. 9 months later, I'm looking to NASA going, give me something I can use, because you're giving me nothing. I mean, how many examples do you want me to throw out there? The fact that there was literally one photograph of the United States, the full Earth in sunlight taken from 1972 till summer of last year. Yeah. The fact that there's nothing, no high definition of anything taken of the Earth spinning on its axis. No astronaut exterior shot where an astronaut is panning 180 degrees or further, even on the moon. We don't even have any video of an astronaut in an airlock opening a door and leaving. Oh, we're going to break.
That's a very good point. Okay, now we've got a very short break coming up. It's only 90 seconds, all right? Now stay with us, because we've not even scratched the surface yet. Okay, so stay with us. It's a 90-second break. When we get back, we're going to be discussing a lot more fascinating stuff.
No hate, no hype. No fear.
You're listening to Truth Frequency Radio.
We are TFR.
Welcome back. This is Chris Everard, broadcasting live on the Truth Frequency Radio Network. We're live on FM with Denver, Colorado, Eugene, Oregon. In the second hour, we're going to be live on FM in the south of Italy. And my special guest is Mr. Mark Sargent. We're discussing the flat Earth theory and lots of weird legends to do with the different kind of forms of our planet, according to, legends that have gone by in history. And right now, I want to ask Mark about the sun. Now, I just made a documentary called The Black Sun, and I have had a live feed from the SOHO, S-O-H-O, Solar Observatory, which is out in space. And I've had that live feed on my desktop now since 2010. And it shows 4 different simultaneous views of the sun. Now, you must never look at the sun using binoculars or a telescope or even a magnifying glass, because it'll damage your eyes. But there are solar observing telescopes. I have one. It's called a Coronado. And what it is basically a series of optical elements, but there are special gases inside the telescope. And this enables the telescope to filter the light from the ultraviolet light from the sun. And I have to say that when you link up an HD camera to it, you can just sit there watching it all day on a plasma TV because it's fascinating. You can see in real time a lot of activity on the surface of the sun. Now, my question to you, Mark, is that if we follow this Truman Show kind of theory, and you say that all of the celestial objects that we're seeing through our telescopes are just merely images, why is it that the sun is so active and it's moving and you see flares and it's obviously a very energetic object? And also, why is it that we're seeing these anomalous objects? If you go to the Enigma channel, it's enigmatv.com, and you subscribe, you can see my Black Sun documentary. You can see that there's enormous. When I say big, I mean these things are bigger than the planet Jupiter, which is already big. I would say that these objects are about an eighth of the actual size of the sun, which is fantastically enormous. Yeah. They're spherical objects, and they're coming and they're hovering close to the sun, and they're sucking the plasma energy from the surface of the sun. They hover there for about 24 hours, and they just glide off. Yeah. So not only have we got the sun that we can observe in real time now using these new Coronado solar observation telescopes, we can film it in real time. And as we've been filming this over the years, and we've also got the live feeds as well from NASA and from the European Space Agency, ESA, we are seeing anomalous objects. So how does that fit in with the Truman Show theory? Sure. Why are they bothering to make it such an energetic, constantly moving object, and also have these anomalous objects hovering next to the sun?
Yeah, and I know what anomalous objects you're talking about, and I used to be a fan of the SOHO system as well. I'm not saying that the sun isn't real by any stretch. It is the one thing, that and the moon, that are different from a regular old planetarium, and that is the sun and the moon are free-flowing objects that are inside the structure or right outside the structure, and that they are three-dimensional in nature, probably. The sun is probably not an omnidirectional light, and what you said, though, pretty much was where I was going, some of these objects you're saying they're fantastically large, because I remember seeing some of those images too, and I was going, these things are huge. I mean, they've got to be bigger than Jupiter, unless so big they defy reason, unless the sun is a lot smaller than you think and a lot closer, in which case those objects become way, way, way smaller. In the flat Earth model or enclosed system model or enclosed Earth or whatever you want to call it, the sun and the moon are roughly the same size, maybe between 30 and 40 miles wide and maybe a couple thousand miles high. Maybe we're still trying to work that one out, exactly where that is. If that's the case, and then they're free flowing like a mobile over a child's crib, kind of like the yin yang symbol. You could take the yin yang symbol and lay it on top of the flat Earth map, and it actually works pretty well. But in which case, in fact, Eric Dollard, kind of a kooky scientist, he is specializing in electricity. He was the one that was saying that, look, he goes, the sun is just basically a giant light bulb, and the energy, there's no fusion there. It's the energy is coming from somewhere else. Now, yeah, you might see flares and things like that. But from what we're saying is those flares are very, very small by comparison. Now, yeah, could it be on fire? I suppose, maybe. But it's not what we think it is. It is not hundreds of thousands of miles wide or whatever the sun's diameter is.
Well, the official statistics are that the moon is 250,000 miles away. Now, there have been tests with lasers. There was a test overseen by the British astronomer Sir Patrick Moore, who died recently. And when they fired a laser at the moon, over a distance of 250,000 miles, that tiny thin beam did actually, it went, once it hit the surface of the moon, I can't remember exactly the size of the red spot that they created. I think it was as much as 4 miles wide.
I haven't seen any footage of it. I mean,
Yeah.
the laser tests that
Oh
I've seen
yeah,
on
the laser kind of experiments have not only fired lasers at the moon. The Japanese did it just recently, but they're also picking up the laser reflected light as well. So we have now on the official websites, on the official astronomy websites, you know, to the millimeter distances. Obviously, the distances change because we're dealing with elliptical orbits, but you know, those laser experiments, how would they fake those in the Truman Show scenario?
In order to fake anything in the Truman Show scenario, you've got to start from the beginning, and that starts with the formulation of NASA in 1958, the first official space agency, unless you want to count the Soviet Union. When what I'm saying is, I'm going way back here, and I'm saying because I was not a big believer, and I know an American, I was never a big believer in the moon program. I don't think Apollo happened by any stretch. I think the Americans faked it from day one.
Yeah.
But it really bothered me for a bunch of years because I couldn't figure out why. It's like, why would you bother faking it? It's like, yeah, fine, plant the stars and stripes, rah, go team. But when I finally got into the Truman Show and closed world system, then I understood it because then it all of a sudden dawned on me. It's like, oh, okay, you didn't want to fake the moon landing. You didn't want to fake the space program. You had to. Because if you don't do it, eventually the major subcontractors, especially the military subcontractors like Lockheed Martin and Boeing and General Dynamics and Hughes, they're going to eventually get involved. And you have to control the sky. You've got to lock it down from day one. And so you create NASA and every other corresponding space agency, and you have them follow a certain blueprint. Keep 99.99% of the wrench turners out of the loop, and the rest of the people, you just let it go. And so far it's worked.
Yeah,
I don't believe
you mentioned Hughes Aircraft, and
sorry, they're helicopter. Sorry, I meant somebody else.
Yeah, well, Hughes is a very interesting company because it was started by America's first billionaire, or the world's first billionaire, Howard Hughes, and he was an aviator in his own right, and he actually developed high-speed aircraft even before the days of the jet engine. And then when jet engines came along, he actually worked alongside Boeing to actually create the world's first jet airliners, which were called Constellations. They're like small, old-fashioned versions of the 737. And Howard Hughes was an outsider. He was not accepted by Hollywood. He was outside of the Hollywood system. His family fortune was in designing oil drilling bits, so he wasn't really even in the aircraft business. But because he was so wealthy and because his oil drilling company was so profitable, he was able to actually, if he wanted to design the world's fastest plane, he did. If he wanted to employ the world's greatest aviation engineers, he did. He just did whatever he wanted because he had the resources to do it. Now, he was actually flying himself. And if you remember, Howard Hughes actually flew around the world.
Okay.
So my question is, all of these people like Charles Lindbergh, Amy Johnson, Howard Hughes, and we've just had a guy fly around the world using a solar-powered plane. Are these people bullshitters?
No, they're flying around the world. Not at all. They you can fly around the world. I could get in a plane and circumnavigate the world very, very easily. But
what stops Howard Hughes from bumping into the dome?
Oh, because he's flying in a big circle, either a giant left-hand turn or a giant right-hand turn. It's no different than running your finger around a dinner plate. You are still circumnavigating the dinner plate. You're just not circumnavigating the globe. If everything, and for people that don't know this for the first time, what we're talking about here is the azimuthal equidistant map, which is basically the layman's version, is the UN flag. So if you take your hand on top of the North Pole of a globe and you flatten it and you make it into a circle, that's what we're talking about. The continents are all still there. The oceans are still there. The only continent, of course, that turns into something very, very strange is Antarctica, but that's another part of this.
No, but hang on a minute. These round-the-world flights are all planned according to aviation fuel supply. And so they have to make stop-offs. For example, Richard Branson flew across the Atlantic in a hot air balloon. And he was using the jet stream. So he had to take off near Marrakesh in Morocco to actually get up into the jet stream so that he would then be taken to the landing zone in the USA. Well, round the world trips in airplanes also use the winds. They also use the jet streams, but it's not just a balloon. They're going to have to stop off and make sure that there's resources of fuel for them at certain stop-off points.
Yeah.
How is it that if you fly like Howard Hughes did and A.B. Johnson, say, for example, where you start off in Paris and your next refueling is in Reykjavik in Iceland, and then your next refueling is in Florida, in Miami in Florida, and then your next refueling is Albuquerque, and then your next refueling is Seattle, you're basically leapfrogging across these continents. You're not flying around the continents. So how comes they then end up landing in Paris, which is the place where they actually left?
Sure. If you're in the northern hemisphere, even on a flat Earth map, it's not going to be that exaggerated as far as the distance goes. In fact, the northern hemisphere, the flights aren't that bad at all. Now, if you talk about the southern hemisphere, then you're going to run into problems. Look at Amelia Earhart, who, dipped down below the equator in a few of her logs, if I'm not mistaken, and I think came up short. People have asked me that a lot. It's like, what happened to Amelia? I go, well, if she was going for broke and got a little low on fuel and all of a sudden realized her fueling station wasn't there and she's over the water, she's going to dump. Most people, though, if they circumnavigate, try to go for the equator.
But in this Truman model, there are no hemispheres, are there?
We have no other name for them right now. So the northern hemisphere I call them the inner ring and the outer ring. So everything from if the North Pole is the center of the dinner plate, then everything from the equator to the center is the inner ring, and then everything from the equator to the edge is the outer ring. But right now, for anyone who's listening, it's like, okay, it's the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere.
So that brings me logically to another question. If you've got somebody like Elon Musk, or you've got Sir Richard Branson, who's actually got his own space port, he's actually built a space port out in the Mojave Desert. It's not far from Area 51. He's building another space port in Australia, and I think he's going to build another one in Sweden or Scotland. And he's got his own space rockets, and Elon Musk as well, who runs SpaceX. How are you going to stop a entrepreneurial multi-billionaire from actually designing a craft where they're going to take off and they're going to keep going and they're going to bang into the dome?
Yeah. It's a couple of ways you could do that. The first way, of course, is that and you got to remember, those two companies, Virgin Galactic and SpaceX, are the first, private companies to really delve into this, unless you're talking about the military subcontractors.
Yeah, but I have to say this to you, Mark, on the Enigma channel for the last year, there has been this kind of explosion of private space projects.
Yep, that's because NASA's trying to get out.
There are people launching their own satellites into space. You can see it on the Enigma channel. There's people making their own space platforms. I know this sounds crazy. They're doing it in their garages. They're using weather balloons. The weather balloon goes up to, about 65,000 feet. And then what happens is that they've got like a toy robot, or they're launching all kinds of weird things into the edge of space. Basically, they're taking photographs, they're taking live video. You can see all this on. I mean, why it's not on the mainstream media, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things not on the mainstream media. I suppose it's they don't want people to be doing it. But we've made several. We've got a TV series called Space Journeys. You can see from the very beginning of somebody's, sort of scribbling out an idea on a piece of paper to them going into their garage. They're using tools from Home Depot. They're using old packaging material, and they're buying the extra bits and the cameras and everything that they need from eBay. And you see in our TV shows, we follow the entire process, and they actually then launch it, and it gets up to incredible altitudes where the sky is no longer blue. It's not even purple. It's black. It's space. And there's several launches now where they've taken 2 cameras up at the same time, and you can see that there is a curvature.
Oh, can you? Can you now?
Yeah.
Without a fisheye lens, we have yet to see one.
No. I'm sorry. The fisheye lens idea, based around the fact that you've got fisheye lenses on cheaper HD cameras like the GoPro. People are using different types of cameras nowadays. For example, the AX series is made by Sony. It's been created by the Sony Motion Pictures division, and they really know what they're doing as far as cameras are concerned. Yeah. They designed all of the cameras that George Lucas ended up using. I mean, they are responsible for the transition away from celluloid over to digital film, digital cinema technology. The AX series of cameras, they're real tough. They're tough buddies. And you can actually put them into a special enclosure called a Gates enclosure, which is, it protects it against pressure. These cameras have professional digital cinema lenses. They're not GoPro fisheye lenses at all.
Fine.
In actual fact, a GoPro lens is not really a true fisheye lens. A true fisheye lens looks really weird. It looks like a mirrored dome. What you're talking about is a photographic lens aberration, which is called convergence. And that does actually, the closer you get to a GoPro camera, the more you'll see that the convergence is warping the actual image. But you don't get that with AX cameras.
That may be true, but I haven't seen it. I've seen weather balloon stuff go up to, I think what the caps on weather balloons is 130,000 feet, give or take. I have yet to see any footage from anyone that isn't, and what I'm saying is when the camera bounces up and down, if the horizon bounces, starts changing shape with the camera, we kind of are lumping that into the whole fisheye phenomena. But everything that we've seen is dead flat. And we scour the internet, just scour it for anybody to come up and show us anything with a legitimate curve that isn't sent to us by a space agency. Everything sent by a space agency of any kind we consider invalid.
Okay, well, check out the Space Journeys TV series because there's plenty of footage from private individuals.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
Would love to see it.
Okay, so now I want to come on to, objects like the moons of Mars. Mars is a planet where we can actually see the actual surface from the Earth. Saturn, we can't see the surface of Saturn because the atmosphere is too thick. Same with Jupiter, same with Neptune, same with Uranus. Now, with Mars, we've got 2 moons called Deimos and Phobos. Why they're called that is weird. There's a lot of weird naming of these celestial objects. For example, Phobos is the Greek word for fear. Why on earth would you call a moon of a planet fear? I don't know. But they are not spheres. Deimos and Phobos are shaped like potatoes. And the thing is, Mark, is that if you look at the satellite imagery of the scanned surface of the Earth that doesn't show you the oceans, it just shows you the topography of the planets of the countries on our planet, you'll see that the Earth is not a sphere. It's a knobbly ball. And some of those nodules are really, really big. Like there's thousands of feet difference between the plains of the Netherlands and the summit of Mount Everest. And what we see with Deimos and Phobos, which are the moons of Mars, is we see that same kind of terraforming, but shrunken down because they're very small moons. And they just, like I say, they look like potatoes floating in space. So can you explain what's going on there? Why can we even bother seeing them? Why are they creating such a complicated thing? Because we can see the Phobos and Deimos actually revolving around Mars. And, of course, when they go behind Mars, we can't see them for a while. And then they emerge again. I mean, why is it that they're creating such a complicated visual phenomena, especially considering that Mars, has only really clearly been photographed in recent years by the Voyager?
Why would you create so much detail in any sound stage that we do now? People win awards for creating excessive amounts of detail in some of the simulated sets we do.
Yeah.
When it comes to this world, the more detail, the better. Look at the detail.
So the detail is there, in other words, to actually fool the maximum number of people.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Even though there's only a small handful of people on the planet, like the astronomy community, who would even bother to try and look at the moons of Mars.
But that community still spreads a lot of pictures around. They're not shy about putting books together and magazines and getting images out as fast as they can. The general public has seen all the images. So yeah, there's only a few people percentage-wise that look up into the sky, and actually look with any great interest. But yeah, you got to create the detail somewhere, and it's for those people. Yes, absolutely. I think that every detail in the sky was created for our benefit. It's not just a giant.
That means then that you believe that every detail of the topography of the land has also been artificially created.
Yeah, no different than the Truman Show. I've gotten into arguments with people about this where they say, well, aren't you going to leave anything to chance, anything to nature, anything, leave something organic? I go, why? Why would you do that? If you have a lizard in a terrarium, is any part of his home, are you leaving that to chance? The light bulb is artificial, the sand, the rocks, the water, the glass cage, his food, everything has been created for his benefit. You would not leave anything organic just because you don't want to leave anything to chance. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying we are in a building. We are in a giant studio that has been meticulously created and crafted.
Okay, now we have a break coming up in about 1.5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And when we come back from the break, what I'd like to talk about, Mark, is if we follow your theory, I'd like to speak about who the creators of this virtual environment are. Okay. Now, I think it's a good idea, Mark, I think you should give people your website before we go into the break so they can surf out onto your website.
You bet. The free site is enclosedworld.com. The subscription site is msargent.com. And if you want to just find any of my stuff, all you have to do is go to any search engine and type in Flat Earth Clues, and that'll take you to somewhere on YouTube or somewhere anywhere else. And it's not hard to find. And there's a book on Amazon.com also called Flat Earth Clues.
Okay. And, I'm sure a lot of the listeners know where to find me. There's about 1 million visitors that come to my news blog, and I'd like to thank everyone who's taken a lot of interest in my news stories. Just recently, we had a big political coup in Westminster, and I was getting over 100,000 people visiting my blog every minute or so. I mean, the figures were off the charts. Now, we're going to be back in 2 3/4 minutes, okay? When we get back...
Wherever you are, make it...
Got different ecospheres. For example, Titan, that's a good example. That is a kind of Earth-like moon, but in close vicinity to Titan, you've got weird moons that are doing things like they're spewing huge amounts of ice into space from volcanic systems which are underneath the surface. Let's just get this right. You're saying that all of that detail, which we've only just started discovering because we've started sending probes into space, is artificially created, like some kind of artificial Truman Show.
Yeah, and not only is it artificially created, or is not only is it level of detail made by the creators, but there's a whole bunch of stories out there that, and I'm going to pick on NASA, I won't pick on anyone else at the moment, that they create just make up stories.
Okay.
That just because it reinforces one subtext, and that is you're on a globe.
What is it that has inspired these makers to do that? What benefit do the makers get?
Oh, you mean as far as like the authority that like NASA and
No. I mean in terms of creating such amazing detail that we can see ice being spewed into space by little moons going around Saturn and also Jupiter.
Sure, it buys you time. It helps reinforce the illusion of space. The people that made this want to keep this going as long as possible because it's interesting. We honestly, as a species, our civilization has only become interesting over the last, in my opinion, the last 500 years.
Okay.
So.
All right. Now, I've been filming you in HD a lot of anomalous objects, and I'm not the only person. I've had a lot of UFO researchers as guests on my show over the years. The UFO phenomenon for me is a very, very serious subject. You don't really take it seriously until you've seen something yourself.
Yep.
Then the whole thing changes. But seeing anomalous objects through a very powerful telescope, which is what I've been doing. I've been doing it for many years. Basically, I got my big telescope in 2010, and I have seen objects traveling at such ridiculous speeds that they're going from horizon to horizon. They're zigzagging, they're stopping, then they're starting, then they're stopping again, then they're changing direction. I mean, it's not only me, but we have a lot of people, and you can see all this on the Enigma channel, enigmatv.com. We have a lot of people with HD cameras. Now we've gone into the new generation of 4K cameras. We've got our cameras linked up to our telescopes. We're using HDMI cables coming out of our cameras, plugged into 55-inch high-definition TVs, which are LED TVs. They're not the old plasma TVs, which we used to use. The quality is absolutely mind-blowing, and these anomalous objects are definitely there. Now, the reason that the big telescopes, so I'm talking about Jodrell Bank, which is a radio telescope, and the big optical telescopes that you see in places like Puerto Rico and in the north of Spain, those telescopes, which once you get more than half a meter, the telescope is so big you can't physically move it yourself. So those telescopes are not picking up the UFOs. And I want to make this clear to the listeners. You can get more UFO footage with a third of a meter telescope than you can with a much more powerful telescope. And the reason for that is because these objects are moving fast, and a third of a meter telescope, you can grab it with two hands, and you can actually track and trace these UFOs yourself and have it filmed in real time. You cannot do that with telescopes which are in the big state-funded and privately foundation-funded observatories, because the telescopes are just too enormous. Why is it that those makers, or whoever has created this Truman Show giant dome, are bothering to put anomalous objects up there, some of which are flying around in flotillas and flying in V formations?
Oh yeah, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. First up, I'll be the first one to admit it. Look, UFOs are real. I've seen them myself. You don't even need a telescope to see them if you want. The fact there was a British guy I was listening to, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, where at the end of his interview, he goes, "You want to see something interesting?" He goes, "Get some night vision binoculars and look up one night and see
Yeah,
what you see." And I did that very thing. I bought some night vision binoculars. I looked up in the sky. I go, wow, there's a lot of satellites up there. I mean, there's so many things flying up there. And then I go, wait a minute, why did that one just make a right-hand turn? Why
yeah,
are those flying in formation? Why did that one just go ballistic?
yeah. And
And
also, I have to say, Mark, is that the optics of telescopes have become so good now.
Mhm.
The mirrors are being created using lasers. Um, you know, the average amateur or a serious amateur can actually pick up these things. If I put my mind to it, I can guarantee that if we spend 6 to 8 hours observing, and it's a clear night, we will actually see some kind of anomalous objects.
Oh yeah,
There's
yeah,
so much of it up there.
yeah, absolutely
It's
agree.
like looking into an aquarium full of fish.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
that's that's how good the optics are now. And in terms of night vision, the optics and the mirrors on the telescopes, which you can buy yourself as a private person,
Mhm.
are so good that they are bending space time.
Mm.
You don't even need night vision equipment any longer because you can set the sensitivity of these high HD 4K cameras and
Mhm.
see virtual night vision through your telescope on a big TV.
Wow, wow, that's awesome.
So why are those things up there?
Because I don't think for a second that we are the first civilization to rent this apartment. A structure like this is not going to be a one-off. It's not going to be just for one
So
civilization.
are you
And
saying that we're locked into this dome and there's like aliens in here with us as well?
it's very possible if we're version 7, who were the first 6 versions, and were there remnants of those civilizations that may have mastered, let's say, the unified field theory enough to create spacecraft or spacecraft that can run, the standard UFOs, all motion possible
Okay.
craft, and
Well,
that's what
these
I think.
objects are flying at ridiculous speeds. When I say ridiculous speeds, I mean I've tracked these things, and like I say, they go from horizon to horizon in less than a minute.
Mhm.
So they're traveling at fantastic speeds. I mean, this is way beyond anything that officially any McDonnell Douglas or any of these British Aerospace or any of these corporations have ever announced.
Mhm. Oh yeah, yeah.
Now,
They're-
what is to stop these fast moving anomalous objects from banging into the dome?
Well, that's just it. I mean, there may be protocols in place. It's one of two things. Either they can get through it or they can't get through it. Either they can phase in and out of it or they can't. If they can't, then they are definitely stuck in here with us, maybe at a different frequency, maybe underneath us, who knows where they're hiding out. We obviously know they're not interacting with us on any regular basis. Or they could be, just outside of this. I mean, if there's one dome, there's probably more. The question is, are certain civilizations allowed to travel between domes? If anyone has any doubt about what goes on, look up the 1561 Nuremberg event, which I still consider to be the greatest and most interesting UFO sighting of all time.
I see. So you think that we're locked into this dome and there's aliens in here with us as well?
Yeah, yeah, I do. But are they aliens? I mean, if they're previous versions of ourselves, like, for example, if they were the survivors, let's pick one, of Atlantis. Let's say Atlantis was a real place,
Yeah.
and there were survivors. Are those aliens, or are they just older versions of us?
Okay.
I mean,
Right. All right. Well, that is mind blowing. So we're going to go on to the next mind blowing thing.
okay.
If we are dealing with a dome
Yeah.
and we're dealing with more or less a flat surface, how thick is the flat plane?
Oh, that's a good question. Because one, we don't know. We know nothing about thickness. I know that much. The deepest hole. If you guys have watched any of my clues, you'll know the deepest hole ever drilled, at least publicly, has been 8 miles. So, and after that, drill bits stop working. So the question is, how deep does people ask me that day one? How deep does this thing have to be? It doesn't have to be very deep at all. Because, we, like, our civilization lives in a very, very narrow band. 98% of our population lives from sea level to about 5,000 feet, or a mile or a kilometer point, whatever. So, could it be 50 miles thick? Could it be 100 miles thick? Could it be 1,000 miles thick? I don't know, because we can't drill down very far. But even though we only drill, the deepest hole we ever drill is 8 miles, all our science textbooks show up. It's like, oh yeah, we can tell you exactly what the Earth looks like on the inside from 0 all the way to 4,000 miles into its core, and then out the other 4,000 miles.
Okay, now the deeper you drill and the deeper you go down into the Earth, the hotter it gets.
Of course.
Why is that? If it's a flat plane?
Oh no, I think the magma system's there, and again, people give me grief about it because they say, well, you're saying that the magma system is artificial, and that can't be possible. I was going to be talking about we can make molten rock right now. We have blast furnaces. How do you think your car is made? The only question is, how deep does the magma system go, and is there something even below that? I think the magma system is artificial as the jet stream, as artificial as the underwater conveyor system, as artificial as everything. It's just part of the system.
All right. Next mind-blowing question is, when you let the water out of your bath in Australia, why does the water spiral down the plug hole in a different direction to England?
Excellent question. And actually, there was a neat, and he's not even a flat earther. I think the YouTube channel is called Smarter Every Day, where he did a simultaneous. And they didn't do it with a bathtub because he wasn't convinced. He was comparing bathtubs to toilets to sinks, and he's going, the southern northern hemisphere thing is more or less a myth in that regards. But then he said, okay, what they did was they filled up some kids' wading pools, identical wading pools with a lot of water, with a drain in the center, and just to make sure there was no ripples, they used eyedroppers and food coloring and released the plugs at the same time. And yes, very, very subtly, was there any sort of counterclockwise versus clockwise rotation? But it was almost unnoticeable. But for the benefit of anyone listening, saying, well, that does prove that there's something going on. I'm going, hey, look, what's gravity in a flat Earth system? Of course, what's gravity in a round Earth system? It's apparently density. But it could also be density in a flat Earth system. But if everything's artificial, then gravity is probably artificial too.
Well, hang on a minute. Gravity, there are particles of gravity called gravitrons.
Yeah.
And they come in waves.
Yeah.
So why does the gravity exist like it does?
You mean where we are standing right now?
Yeah.
I think it's artificial. I think no different than the simulations we've been building in software for the last, 15, 20 years almost, which is you have to build physics into software engines. And in physics, in the software engines, you say, okay, what is gravity? How far does an object fall and what speed does it fall? And you have to create that. It's just a setting. What I'm saying is that, like magnetism, right now, magnetism, metal on metal, certain types of metal. What if there was the ability, a technological ability, to create a molecular magnet, something that could attract organics, water, wood, anything? If you had that ability and it was underneath you, what's the difference between that and what science describes as gravity now? Almost nothing. It's just literally just a setting. If you want to make a person weigh 100 kilograms, you want to make them weigh 500 kilograms. It's just a setting on a dial. Oh, and throw one more thing in there.
Gravity changes according to spin.
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually give somebody, 100-pound weight, and they can't lift it, obviously, with one hand.
Yeah.
But if you then spin that weight on the end of a pole, they can hold it with one hand.
Sure, I've seen that test.
So why does gyroscopic spin change things? Why have the makers of this dome gone to those extreme levels if they're artificially generating gravity?
Just part of the physics engine. Don't know why exactly it was done that way, but it was done that way. I mean, yeah, it works on a merry-go-round. It works on the gyroscopic test you're talking about. But then when it comes to the Earth, there's weirder things that go on. Like, for example, if the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, and we all know water moves very, very easily, then how is all the water uniform over the entire world? Why isn't there this giant band of water, not necessarily saying like Saturn's rings, but that water is going to be pushed towards the equator. And you can say, well, gravity keeps it there. It's going to hold it down. It's going, really? Gravity counteracts centrifugal force entirely? Because we've all been in a car.
Well, no, the oceans actually swell, and they swell according to the relationship between the surface of the water and the position of the moon.
Oh, no, I got you there. But why aren't there bald spots on the North and South Pole? Why is there any water on the North and South Pole if centrifugal force is pulling that water in? Pulling towards the equator. Somebody give me a gravity test, which is, if a 100-kilogram object weighs 100 kilograms at the North Pole, shouldn't it weigh slightly less at the equator? Shouldn't centrifugal force be trying to pull it off just a little bit? And from what I understand, there is no weight difference anywhere. If there was, we'd have massive shipping issues if you're shipping cargo from the equator.
Okay, all right. Well, the next questions I want to get onto are to do with atmospheric pressure. Mm-hmm. Now, we all have seen the Hollywood movies where a submarine gets into problems and it starts going deeper and deeper and deeper. Mm-hmm. And then as it gets deeper, the water pressure around the submarine starts to make the fuselage crack.
Yeah.
Now, if you get some water in a glass jug, and you can try this yourselves at home, you need a few bits of gear, mm-hmm. and you get a vacuum pump, and you lower the pressure inside the glass flask full of ordinary tap water. Once it goes down to less than 1 atmosphere of pressure, the water will boil at room temperature without any heat source whatsoever. Why is it that if this is an artificial dome and an artificial system, that the makers have bothered to make everything pressure sensitive?
I have no idea. That is probably the most original question I've gotten in 18 months. And
everyone can try it at home. It's very easy to do. You have to seal up a glass flask. A flask is the easiest thing to use.
Yeah.
Fill it with tap water. Get a really good rubber seal. Pump out so that it's at lower pressure, and the water will boil.
Okay. I think I can answer it in sort of a roundabout way, which is, if, like you were saying, if it's pressure sensitive, and this is something that's been brought up at least in the last 6-8 months in our groups, which is how exactly, if it's not an enclosed structure, let's say it is a globe, a freestanding globe, and the vacuum of space, we all know the power of the vacuum of space, or any vacuum for that matter. We can lift just about anything with a vacuum if it seals tight enough. How exactly is the atmosphere that we have? How is the air staying here on the globe? How is there not
the official explanation is that the molecules of nitrogen, most of the atmosphere is nitrogen. People think it's oxygen, but it's actually nitrogen, oxygen, have mass. The molecules actually weigh something. They don't weigh a lot, but they weigh something. And all of those multi quintillions of molecules sitting on top of each other are doing that because they're pulled towards the magma center of the planet.
Sure.
And the official explanation is that there is a multi-layered liquid metal core which is spinning in the opposite direction to the crust. And that is creating an electromagnetic bow wave for the entire planet as we go through space.
Uh-huh.
But it's also generating gravitrons and gravity waves, which are all pulling every single object and every single molecule towards the center of our planet.
Sure.
And therefore, the atmosphere basically stays there. But we have found out that Mars probably did have an atmosphere and it lost it.
All right.
Now that detail, because we can see that there is evidence of an atmosphere on Mars. Mm-hmm. Some cataclysm, we're not sure what it was, probably a meteor strike, stripped those molecules away from Mars, probably because the impact was so big it blasted Mars off of its orbit. Why did the makers go to that much trouble? And why did they almost destroy something which they obviously spent a long time making?
Well, unless it's really, really tiny and it didn't take a long time to make. Although, if macro versus micro, it's not going to make that much difference. However, I'm not going to give you the same detailed answer I gave you before. I'll throw another one at you, which is, where is all the Mars data coming from? The United States Mars rover? That rover that supposedly has outlived its battery life, and we all, by at least, 7-8 years now?
Well,
we all know
now, Mark, when because we've had this situation lots of times where the batteries have lasted longer, and everyone who's interested in astronomy, all the amateurs, we all laugh at it because it means that the science program schedules are over. And believe it or not, you can log in on some astronomy websites and you can sign up and you can actually control for 10 minutes various rovers that have still got some battery life, and you can actually steer them. I've done it myself. You can steer rovers around on Mars yourself.
Well. So
there is a certain amount of public access there, even though it's mostly reserved for academia. But,
sure.
Like I say, you can actually, there is a big digital revolution in optics, and you can go out now and you can buy your own solar observatory, which is an amazing thing because you don't have to wait for it to get dark to start observing the sun, and it's absolutely mind-blowing.
Wait, how do you want me to respond to that?
Yeah,
the Mars rover should be dead.
Isn't it? Why would they bother?
I don't believe in the detail in this one. I don't think the Americans have anything on Mars or anywhere. The Mars rover, if a car battery dies, and we all know this, when a battery dies, I mean actually dies, not gets discharged, because you ran it out. I mean, when it reaches its life expectancy and it dies, you cannot revive it. No mechanic in the world. They all walk up and say, "You need a new battery." Nothing I can do.
Yeah, but they've got solar panels that revive the batteries.
No. When the battery itself dies, not when the solar charger is trying to charge it. When the battery exceeds its life expectancy.
Oh, I see.
Well, we'll talk about
that. Now hang on. We've got a 90-second break. All right, it's a very, very short break, and then we're going to come back with more mind-blowing stuff with Mark. All right, so stay with us. 90-second break.
We are TFR.
My faith in destiny is all I need to prevail.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. This has been a fascinating show. It's certainly opened my mind to some pretty strange things, and I've had a few questions from people via Facebook. They've sent me messages. There's a question here from Laura. Are you there, Mark?
I am here.
Her question is this. If you say that the aliens in the UFOs can possibly enter and leave this dome at will.
Yeah.
And I have to say, there are actually, there's some very interesting footage from a group in Mexico called Los Vigilantes. Again, you can see this on the Enigma channel. These guys have got telescopes, binoculars, really good quality cameras, and they have been filming UFOs just literally blinking out. So they're there 1 second and then they disappear. However, they are also filming with two cameras on the same tripod simultaneously, one camera in infrared and one camera using the normal optical mode. And when it blinks out, I'm talking about the UFO, when it blinks out on the optical camera, it's still there in infrared. So that's really interesting.
That is interesting.
But Laura's got a question. How comes the UFOs are able to blink out, but Richard Branson and anybody else who's got their own spaceship, what's to stop them from also hitting the dome?
Oh, yeah. Because the only way I can see that any craft could get out of here would be because we're only using conventional stuff, conventional rockets. I mean, honestly, it's no better than a firework in some cases. You'd have to have a unified field engine. And for those of you who don't know what a unified field engine is, it's the mythical, although I'm sure that Einstein knew, the relationship between gravitational waves and electromagnetic waves. If you have the right type of fuel, you could create, a force field. And if you could do that, maybe you could also use it to alter and phase yourself out of it. Phase yourself out into a different dimension.
I do have to say something about Einstein there, Mark, because Einstein worked in a patents office.
Yes.
And he was able to read all of the patent applications from other people. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of articles that are really unpacking Einstein theories, and they can see that he was actually dipping into other people's theories. And that's why he's become this superstar in the scientific field. But in actual fact, what he was doing is he was reading other people's papers before they were actually publicly published.
Gotcha. Well, we'll throw in Tesla then. How's that?
Now, Tesla is an interesting person because he believed that he was in contact with alien entities on other planets. Yeah. And Marconi, who was also remember Marconi and Tesla were contemporaries of each other. Mm-hmm. Marconi actually went to the newspapers and he said that he'd been picking up broadcasted signals from non-human intelligences that he believed were coming either from Mars or from Venus.
Sure. And yeah, Tesla was a weird dude. He wouldn't surprise me. And, was he picking up communications from what he thought were other planets? Or was he picking up communications from another dimension? We don't know. He was only basing off, the current knowledge of the day.
The thing is, Mark, is that, it's already mind-blowing enough with your theory that we're living in a Truman Show dome.
Yeah, I know, right?
But you've also got UFOs flying around inside it.
I know.
Well, I don't some kind of psyops threat on Richard Branson or Elon Musk to stop them from banging into the dome.
Yeah, you'd have to.
Also, it's multi-dimensional.
Yeah, there's a lot of. Luckily, there's a lot of stuff that dovetails into each other. I mean, the great thing about the whole enclosed world model is that very few conspiracies actually get shut down because of it. Aliens are still around, astrology is still around, JFK and 9/11 and everything else you can think of is still around. The only things that really don't happen anymore are like the Richard Hoagland, we've got a base on the moon and a base on Mars and stuff like that. But the rest of it's pretty good. It's still up there, And by the way, as far as Elon Musk and Richard Branson go, eventually it was something that I had thought of anyway, which was if a private space program is vigilant enough and they're determined enough, sooner or later, the government's going to have to let them in on something. That, and of course, you got to remember these companies, a lot of the engineers that they dig up, it's a private company, but a lot of the engineers, who are you going to hire? You're going to hire engineers from other space companies, like government space agencies. At that point, you've got that place pretty much infiltrated, so you can slow it down. Look how many accidents, how many slowdowns and delays Elon Musk and SpaceX had. I mean, they've crashed a lot of rockets in the last couple of years.
Well, I mean, it goes with the territory, doesn't it, really?
Well, yes. Yes, it does.
It's a lot of trial and error. I mean, let's face it, in the early days of ordinary aviation, there was a lot of deaths.
But should it be trial and error for some of these things? Like, for example, I got to get this in before the show ends. There was something I had found. Well, somebody else had found it, and I kind of just pushed it into the limelight. Which was, you can go to the NASA.gov website and look up a video that they made and put on television called Orion Trial by Fire. And they put it out there and they said, we're the Orion program going to Mars. And they said, we're the first crafts we're going to send up there. They're going to be unmanned because we still haven't figured out how to deal with the Van Allen radiation belts. And I'm thinking, wait, why would you say that? You dealt with it back in the 60s, and this video was made at the end of 2014. Why would you say that on television?
Well, I've interviewed the Apollo. I've interviewed Alan Bean, who is, officially he's the fourth man to walk on the moon, and he was a Skylab captain.
Mm-hmm.
I've interviewed Walter Schirra, who is an astronaut, which a lot of people don't know his name, but he is one of the early pioneers. Edgar Mitchell.
Yep.
I've interviewed Dick Gordon, who is the command module pilot on Apollo 12.
Yep.
I asked them questions. I mean, one of the questions which I asked them is, do the stars look any different when you're actually in space?
Mm.
And they didn't answer me straight away. And Dick Gordon said to me, "Well, they kind of look the same." Now that's a very interesting comment, because the water vapor in our atmosphere, I don't know whether people know this, but actually the earliest magnifying glasses and the earliest lenses were drops of water. Leonardo da Vinci used a drop of water on a piece of card or wood, and that was his lens. He used to project images from the outside world onto the wall of his studio. It's called a camera obscura. And water droplets do actually make good optical devices. And all of the molecules of water in our atmosphere magnify the stars. And if you look at footage from even when somebody points a camera outside a Concorde or a supersonic jet, you can see that the space sky looks dark, really black, and there's no stars, because there's not enough water molecules to magnify the stars.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting.
And so for Dick Gordon to actually say, "Oh, it looks more or less the same," I have to say, it did make me a bit suspicious.
Oh, yeah. Well, that and the international press conference when you had Neil in the center.
Oh, well, that's Apollo 11, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the 1969 one, yeah.
Yeah, and he was asked about the stars, and he starts hedging, and the guys flanking him, the astronauts flanking him, they were looking at him like, "Dude, what are you doing?" And I still go back to, because I made a clue on it, where, Bart Sebrell, even though I don't really like him much as a journalist, he lucked out when he came up that little gadget thing where he said that, put your hand on the Bible and swear that you went to the moon. And they wouldn't touch it. They treated that Bible like it was radioactive.
Yeah, mind you, a couple of them did. A couple of them did swear on the Bible.
Yeah, but they kind of got their way out of it.
Yeah,
they wasn't. But why? And it bugged me for a long time, because I think it was in 2004. Because I was going, wait, these guys. I mean, yeah, they're Boy Scouts. They're the right stuff. Do-gooders and all this. But they're not. They can't be like, all of them can't be like devout Christians that are so wrapped up in religion that they won't do it. And then, But this put it in a whole other context, because let's face it. If this world is enclosed, if there is, that means the handprint of God, or you want to call it intelligent design, you want to call it whatever you want, that's real, which means it puts a whole nother level on our accountability. Yeah. The devil and angel on your shoulder.
Okay. All right. Well, we got to crack on, Mark, because we're running out of time.
Sure.
We had a meteor that was filmed by many, many people in Russia about 2 years ago, or
I remember this
about 17 or 18 months ago.
Yep, I know it.
It broke up, and it damaged factories, and it actually damaged a large geographical area.
Yep.
It didn't come down as one lump. As it was coming down, it broke up.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from?
Oh, that definitely didn't come from us. It was my ex-co-host from my show. He said it.
In Arizona, they have an amazing oral history.
Mm-hmm.
And what they say is that they've traveled the planet and they've settled in many different geographical areas of our planet.
Mm-hmm.
There was a cataclysm in the past, and so they took refuge underground.
Yes.
When they were underground, they met a race of people who the Hopi Indians call the Ant People.
Yep.
And these Ant People were very, very compassionate, and they were very helpful. How is it that we've got these complicated oral histories stretching back thousands of years, and the Hopi Indians really truthfully believe it? Is that real? Or is that also a construct
it's absolutely real. In my opinion, no, I don't think it's a story. I do think there are remnants, hopefully, of just about every civilization that's lived here. So if the ant people are down there, if there's a race that was based off of reptile.
Okay, so on this flat plane that is like a certain thickness, you believe that there are inner Earth races as well?
I do. And of course, I didn't invent that whole concept, but I kind of call it the basement club, which is if a group makes it on the surface, if they survive long enough, eventually, they get to, go down and hang out, because I think the surface is more of the testing ground for whatever civilization is to come. And every civilization that passes and goes and gets to hang out with the other civilizations, be it in the sky with UFOs or underneath in a hollow earth scenario type thing, there's protocols in place to where they are not, you call it prime directive, they are not allowed to interfere. Of course you could pick off somebody in a boat or a forest or whatever.
What is it that stops a giant animal like a blue whale from bashing into the dome and possibly do a lot of damage?
Because at the outer edge, we got time. The Antarctica is because it's in layers. So as you're heading towards Antarctica, right? We'll call it the outer edge. The water gets colder and colder until you get icebergs. Then at the edge of Antarctica, I think it's 150, 200 feet straight up of ice. Coastline. Find a beachhead. That takes some doing. If you can get on top of that, then it slopes up really, really fast to about 2 miles. 2 miles high, and then goes in, I don't know how far. We don't know. It could be 1,000 miles. It could be 5,000 miles. Then you reach wherever the barrier is. A blue whale, when they reach the edge, all they're going to run into is rock and ice, because that's just the Antarctic coastline. Now, if you're flying, then you get a whole different story. Richard Byrd, he was looking down there from 1928 all the way almost up until his death in 1957. He was flying around and looking for it for 30 years.
Okay. Now, there is a famous photograph, Mark, that is usually flashed up on the screen whenever there's a documentary about Admiral Byrd.
Yeah.
And it shows like a kind of concave circular hole in the surface of the Earth.
Yes.
Is that fake? What's the provenance of that photo?
Yeah, I think it's fake. If there is a hole in the North Pole, nobody ever took a picture of it. Did Richard Byrd make it there in 1926 in a rickety plane? Maybe. It's a good story, but that's where I kind of was led down the rabbit hole, because.
But he also had a kind of giant machine called a snow cruiser as well, though, didn't he?
Yeah, well, not in 1926. He didn't. 1926 was just a plane. But what was interesting was then he was ordered by, I have no doubt, the powers that be, down to Antarctica in 1928, and he just kept hitting that place. And to where I think they gave up in 1954 when he goes on television on the Longines Chronoscope show, where we've got, well, thank God we have the footage, it's on YouTube, where he comes on and says, oh yeah, there's Antarctica is made out of money, and we may actually be squabbling with other countries about it. And then he goes down for his last mission, the very next one, Operation Deep Freeze, and then everybody panics, and every nation unilaterally leaves. They sign the treaty and they say, yeah, nobody gets to go back to Antarctica again, ever. And
actually, the Queen, Buckingham Palace, have actually claimed a huge lump of Antarctica.
Oh, you can claim it all you want.
And it's called Queen Elizabeth Land. They actually renamed it last year, or about 18 months ago.
Cool.
And they also own the Falkland Islands, which are called Las Malvinas, which are islands which they stole from Argentina.
I do.
And they also stole the South Sandwich Islands as well.
Huh.
Now, the British are down there, and, there are research scientists down in Antarctica from Britain.
Yes.
It seems that the only other nation that is investing in having a claim there is China. So do you believe that there is a giant hole there, like those fake pictures, or do you think that those pictures just complete fake?
No, I think those pictures are complete fake. I think
Okay.
in Antarctica, the actual barrier, it may even be a soft barrier where you can't get to it, where you can't walk up to it and knock on it with your hand.
Okay.
Um,
Right. Well, we're
could be,
coming into the last 5 minutes of the show. It's been really fascinating, Mark. All right. But I think that, judging by a few messages that come in from Facebook, I think we really, should sort of lay the land out and summarize what we've discussed in the show. Basically, what you're saying is that it's an enclosed space and it's a massively scaled up version, roughly, of what you see in the Truman Show.
Yes.
And that there are entities who are intelligent, like, aliens, though they may not be aliens, they could be interdimensional beings. And they are also captivated in this enclosed area with us as well, which sounds to me a very dangerous thing. But it's rather like a zoo, isn't it?
Pretty much. Yeah, like a giant terrarium.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the flat plinth is, it is really deep, and there is a magma system, and you believe that, there could be inner Earth races like the legends of Agartha as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And that evolution, now this is something which we need to cover before the end of the show. Why is it that things like blue whales, they used to walk on the land and then they returned back to the sea? If this is an artificial construct, why have they built in or hardwired into the evolution such complicated things?
That was a work in progress. All I can tell
because
you there.
the blue whales still have the remnants of legs.
Yeah, and we were born, if I'm not mistaken, we still have fragments of tails when we're still in a fetal position. And we'll look at the dinosaurs. Why were the dinosaurs revamped? Was it just too easy? A bunch of lizards, giant lizards roaming the earth.
Yeah. Well, why were they? I mean, why does that evolutionary system, why is it there, and why is it so complicated if everything is an artificial enclosed world?
Well, you got to experiment on something. You got to start somewhere. So why not with giant lizards? And if other species can't develop because they're giant lizards, you get rid of the giant lizards and work on them. Now, do I think that evolution is a natural process that took millions and millions of years? No, not at all. I think it's been accelerated going from one version to another. And the carbon dating,
because there have been several societies who believed, I think, I could get this wrong, but I think that there's several societies that believe like the planet is only, I think the Christian scientists think that the planet was only formed 3,500 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, that's a bit of a stretch, but I don't think it has to go back millions of years. I mean,
okay, so when, as far as your research, when was this artificial enclosed world created?
Ooh. That's a tough one. If you have to go back all the way to version 1, that's the first time anyone's ever asked me that. I would say less than a million years.
Less than a million years?
I'd say less than a million years to pull it off.
Okay,
maybe a little longer when you're doing.
That's Upper Paleolithic. So as we dig down into the crust of places like the Texas Basin, we're finding real proto-dinosaurs. These are like the really weird ones that are at the beginning of the dinosaur era.
Yeah.
Pleistocene and before then.
Yeah.
Why are they there in the crust of the Earth if it's only a million years old?
I know you're running out of time. Real quick, I think they're there. I think they're real. I think they're there. They're part of the old system. I just think that the carbon dating scale is way, way off. I don't think that.
Yeah, but if the artificial dome was created a million years ago, how comes we're able to dig up pterodactyls that go back more than a million years?
Well, that's just it, because I don't think that it goes back that far. I think the carbon dating system is wrong. So whatever they're using, if they say it's 20 million years old, I say it may only be 200,000 years old. but they're saying because of these readings, that's how we're doing. That's where I'm going.
Well, carbon dating has had a few problems, but it's not been out by millions of years.
We'll find out in the end, won't we?
Well, I don't know. I now, just to wrap up, because we're in the last 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed discussing these things with you, Mark.
Oh, thanks.
I don't really, I mean, I have to believe what I see with my own, research with my own astronomy gear.
Sure.
And I can see that space is deep and that I don't think there is an enclosed world from what I've seen, but I have an open mind.
All right.
Okay, everyone, I'm going to be back next week. Thank you very much, Mark. I really enjoyed the show. And you can catch up with me on the Enigma channel. I'm making a new documentary about this Zionist kind of terrorist group in the 1950s. That's going to be on the Enigma channel at the end of this week. It's really fascinating. Some of them still around.